name is Matěj Horák. I work as backend developer for a company called Airthings. And today I would like to share my personal experience of managing multiple services inside Git repository with using a specific tool called NX that helped us improve efficiency in CI/CD, but also reduce risk with deployments. I will most first talk about Monorepo and its challenges. Then I will quickly talk about the possible tools, and then we jump straight to NX and how to do deployments and releases, and lastly some conclusions and tips. My talk requires basic coding experience and understanding of how Git works, but do not worry if you are a beginner. I will have interactive examples, so I believe it will be very easy to follow, but I will also share my slides. I will present a QR code to my slides by the end of the talk, so you will be more than welcome to check it out later on. And of course, if you'll have any questions, I will be more than happy to answer. And I have also some stickers, so you can stay by the end of the talk, and I will be more than happy to give you a developer sticker. But let's talk about Monorepo. Monorepo is a single repository containing multiple projects with well-defined relationship. It's a concept usually used by large companies, for example, Google, Facebook, etc. And the main idea or benefit is that it helps very well with code sharing and forces atomic changes. What it means is that if we do a change in one submodule, that change has to be reflected in the parent module. Let's take a look at an example. So imagine we have a simple service for creating or registering users, and we have an API with an endpoint, and once user sends a request to this API, we publish an event that is picked up by Lambda, and that Lambda is responsible for sending a confirmation email. In code, it would look like that we will have a module that has this post endpoint where we initialize the data somehow, and then we publish an event and send response back to the user. The event is picked up by the event handler, which is a simple function that is just using some email provider, and only thing it does, it's sending email confirmation verification email to the user. And you can see in this example, and also in the previous API module, that we are using some data classes, or in other languages, type definitions. That is usually a good idea to extract in another module. We can call it library. So in this case, we have a library for the data types, and then also we can have a module for our example for generating the content of the email. And using Monorepo means that all these codes would sit inside a single repository. So if we do a simple change, for example, update the library for generating the content of the email, Monorepo helps us make sure that this change is reflected in all services. In typical developer workflow, we create pull requests where we run some CI checks, for example, run tests. And in Monorepo, the idea of Monorepo is we run the tests for all services for such a change. And then once we merge this PR, we deploy this PR, and we again release all services. And I don't know how about you, but for me, this was very time-consuming, because every time I did this simple change, that it was just a small adjustment to a specific minor service, I had to spend a lot of time waiting to get actually to the feedback loop. Okay, can I send this PR to a review? And on top of that, releasing all services all the time, especially if you want to do deployments, multiple deployments every day, it seems like a risk for me, because it's just creates unnecessary use of resources every time we start up the service, and then that can be some puts higher load on our databases, etc. And doing this for no reason, because a lot of services were not changed, seemed very redundant. And you can think of that we could adjust this instead of deploying all services all the time and do it a bit more manually, so we kind of know what's going to happen. But I would say that's even worse, because then it would be very easy to forget to deploy something, or forget that one service is dependent on another, and that would create even more risk. And that was my initial motivation to look for a tool for Monorepo. In my current company, I was specifically looking for something I could use with Kotlin and Gradle, and I found a couple of options, but mostly I remember that in my previous company, we used a cool tool called NX. It's a tool that comes from JavaScript ecosystem, which to me is a synonym of really good developer experience. And even though you need a Node.js on your machine, it's just very easy to set it up and adjust it to your own needs. It's an open source project with active community, so there are new features coming almost every week. And what is more interesting is that NX uses NX for their own development. So it's actually a nice way to get inspiration and understanding how the tool actually works, what it can do, and it's kind of like another way to get like documentation, how can I use the tool. I'm speaking on my behalf. I use NX because it works very well, but I think it's worth to mention that the tool is also developed by a team that offers a paid product on top of it. The product is about basically storing some results of the CI outputs that can like simplify the pipelines even more, but it's more than okay to use the tool without the product, and it still works very well. It supports many languages and frameworks, so to highlight JavaScript, JVM, Golang, .NET, Rust, and many other things like React, Next.js, Nest.js, a lot of stuff. And for today, because of this, I kind of decided to skip the setup instructions because it's very platform specific, but I kind of almost can guarantee that I believe it will be very easy. All you need to find is like find a specific plugin you need, install Node.js on your machine, and then run a simple script, like a simple command from the documentation, and you will have the setup ready in 5 minutes, and it's very easy to actually get it working and get started with it. However, let me show how does NX work. The main thing that NX provides is a command called affected that analyzes which files were modified. And it kind of modifies like which projects were modified, and we can use this output later on. Let's go back to our example. So we have our API module, and if I run git status, I can see that I'm on the main branch, and there's nothing to commit. Basically, no changes has been done locally so far. So if I run the affected command using NX, I can see I will get a very similar output. Let's make a simple change, and let's see how will it look after that. So in the API, I will just do a simple change and just change the email. If I run NX now, it will show the API. And you might think, well, this is a very simple use case, and I can just use ChatGPT or GitHub Copilot to generate like a simple script that would solve this use case. But it gets more interesting when we change a module that is a dependency. So let's just get back to the original state, and let's revert the change and go to the event handler. So if I update now the email utils library and run the affected command now, I can see that NX shows not just the event, the library, but also the event handler, because there is a dependency. It does work only on like the import way. Unfortunately, I try to look if there is a way to kind of see what is actually used. So even if I do just like a simple comment change inside the module, NX would basically still consider it, oh, this change has to be reflected in all modules. But even just this is very nice and it's very powerful. And in the end, this is the main utility of NX, and there's much more things, but basically, you can analyze changes that have been done locally, but also between specific commits and specific branches. But what is more important is that we can run specific things against this output. And this will become very handy when we want to run things like tests, build, and other. So in this example, like you can see that we first ask NX to get us the affected projects, and then we run tests against this output. Or like we can actually do just the second command, and it will work out of the box. So how do we create target? Well, you can basically define whatever you want, so any type of script will work for you. It's just about like reading documentation and finding the best way to do it. But most likely you would like to kind of integrate with the plugin you use. So for example, I use NX with Gradle, and the plugin automatically injects all the tasks that Gradle supports. So basically, I don't need to spend time on defining tasks or targets for running tests, build, etc., and it's done very automatically. And you can also reuse a lot of stuff, so you can have like a workspace level configuration and then enable those things just for a specific project as you need. So in the end, we can run tasks or targets against the affected outputs, but also we can just like request it regardless, and then we can run multiple targets for multiple projects or for all projects. And that's not just what NX can do, there's much more. So just very quick examples. You can, for example, define custom configurations for targets. So in this case, in this example, I created a target to run the service locally, and I can create a configuration to choose when I want to run the service against local containers or against the dev environment. And it's very easy to sort of set it up. There's also a lot of generators and like tools for managing the projects inside the workspace. So you can generate like projects out of scratch, and then you can also like move them as you need, rename them, delete them, a lot of stuff. And lastly, NX also provides like a visual tool where you can sort of see the whole workspace and all the connections. And I do not use it that much, but I think it's something worth to show for this presentation. Because if I go back to the example, I can see that there is some sort of dependency between the API and then the user event handler. So if I run the NX graph command, we can kind of see how NX does see this. And even though there's not direct connection between API and the user event handler, both of them share the same dependency on the model, which means that if we update the model, both of the services would be basically triggered as affected. And basically in our CI/CD, then marked as this has to be deployed if we update the model. And you can also, of course, specify direct connections manually. So there could be a scenario that I would say that APIs, that the event handler is always dependent on the API, and basically hard code this. But I don't know how about you, but I use tool mostly to save time. And for me, the saving time is mostly about automation. So let's try to see how we can use NX for deployments and publishing libraries. The NX team provides a custom GitHub action that helps you to find last successful workflow. So in reality, what happens is that every time, like when you push to main, this action will basically check all push commits since the last successful workflow run, and basically use the affected command against those commits that were just pushed. What it also means that if we push commit that is failing the build, NX will keep including those commits that are failing until the pipeline is fixed. And this works very well, and it's very performant for actions that you run on the main branch. So, for example, for the last sanity checks before deployments and for the actual deployment to make sure that you just deploy what you need to deploy, what you just changed. But I'm a bit more pragmatic when it comes to the PRs, and especially for like junior people, it's more easier to understand and just like target against the main branch all the time when we basically run CI or NX the affected in pull requests. For the actual deployment, we have two options. The option number one is to actually define custom targets for deployments. So basically, again, you can do whatever you want. And then you can specify the configurations, for example, configuration for the dev, staging, or prod. Or you can also just specify the project type inside the project JSON configuration and basically define this is application, this has to be deployed, or this can be deployed, and then basically just use the output of NX as JSON, like later in the CI/CD using your existing actions, so you don't really need to sort of like migrate 100% everything to to NX, you can kind of go like step by step and kind of see where it makes sense for you or not, because sometimes also the pipelines are kind of managed by other teams. So this is something that you need to consider. NX can also help you to automate publishing libraries and basically take care of making the release, publishing it to the package registry, and also like generating changelog. So, for example, there might be a situation that you would like to share the model library with the rest of the company or externally, and you would like to sort of automate the way that if you change something, there will be a new version released. And it does support conventional commits, so you can automatically determine which version is going to be, like what type of update it will be. If it will be a breaking change, meaning major version update. And all you need to do is again to define like a custom target, which with this specific name. And there are many possibilities what you can do, like many ways to kind of configure this. And NX also provides a custom SDK that you can utilize on top of this, so kind of like gives you a bit of more flexibility. But in my experience, it was a bit hard to kind of understand what's the design of this feature, and I really recommend here spending a bit more extra time, try to prototype this on like a playground environment. And I can say that, for example, the tool is more designed to do this type of releases still manually, not when you push to main, which is a bit different than what we talk about. And I kind of don't like doing things manually, but even though that, like, because of those tools and the SDK, it was possible to sort of tweak things in a way that I have a valid, successful pipeline that runs like on each push to main, and I don't need to really worry about library releases as long as I keep the good commit messages. So this was a lot of stuff. So let's go back to some conclusion. So we showed that NX can help us identify dependencies between projects, which is really good. But what's mostly important, that we can run tests in PRs for only affected services. And this will save you a lot of time, especially when the monorepos are quite big. But most importantly, you can also deploy only affected services. And on top of that, we can use it also for managing libraries, its version, and changelog. And in the end, I use NX locally very rarely. For me, it's about automation, so I don't touch the tool as much, only like when I update the version of the tool or when there's some new feature that I would like to try to use. And if I mention back the struggle that either we had to wait a lot of time or there was a lot of risk, like NX helps me to solve this every day. And again, I'm speaking on my behalf, and like as long as this will be working, I will be using NX. Of course, there are some plugins for the most common used editors, and it's not just about the UI, it's more about the IntelliSense, so why not to have it? You can also kind of opt out files from the affected command, so basically ignore, and that can be very handy to kind of like if there should be the affected should be triggered when we do CI/CD updates, or you can kind of decide in your team if when you every time you update a version of some dependency, does it make sense to redeploy the application, or should we just wait for like a new code change? And all this type of things, like it's possible to configure. And lastly, I also recommend to kind of not be afraid to spend a bit of more time and try to apply things a bit more step by step. So for example, the first setups you can do like in your current repository, but when it comes to actually exploring how things work, it's good sometimes to like have a safe playground where you can like commit and see, okay, what does NX shows now? So do not rush it, but it's not difficult tool to use, but I would say it's a bit difficult tool to understand at the start, but I like to believe that maybe you will have better understanding after this talk. This is the QR code where are the slides. I will also eventually include the recording, and I also put like some examples from the CI/CD pipelines for GitHub workflows, so feel free to check it out. And I will give you a couple of seconds to just scan it. 3, 2, 1. Okay, and of course you can also follow me, and I am using the same username on all social media, so I'm more than happy to stay in touch. And if at any point, like a couple of months ago, a couple of months in the future, you find out that you kind of need struggle with NX a bit, feel free to come to contact me, and I'm more than happy to help exchange experience. And if you have any questions, feel free to come to me also after this talk and throughout the rest of the conference. And as I said, I have some developer stickers, so also feel free to come if I just want a sticker. That's all from me, and thank you so much for your attention, and enjoy the rest of the conference.